Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey there, welcome back to the TalentGrow Show. This is Halelly Azulay, and I'm your leadership development strategist with another episode. And this time, our guest is Dan Pontefract. He is the chief envisioner at a company called TELUS, which is Canada's biggest telecommunications company, similar to maybe AT&T in the States. He leads the transformation office within TELUS, and he's also the best-selling author of 2 books so far, The Purpose Effect and Flat Army. But he does dish about his newest book, which is now still in the writing, but we get a great insight into what it is all about and what's motivating him to write it. Dan and I talk about how important it is to have a purpose-driven culture and the kind of change that he has helped create within his organization that created a huge uptick in employee engagement and the transformation that they're now teaching others to create inside of their organizations with the transformation office. We talk about the 2 biggest challenges that leaders face today, and he talks about things like societal ADD and 3 types of thinking and when not to think. So I think you're going to find this interview very interesting and also very actionable. I enjoyed it so much, so I hope that you will too. Thank you for tuning in to the TalentGrow Show. Without further ado, here is episode 49. Welcome back to the TalentGrow Show. This is Halelly Azulay. I'm your leadership development strategist. And today on the show, I'm very pleased to have Dan Pontefract. He is the chief envisioner at TELUS, a Canadian telecommunications company where he leads the transformation office, a future of work consulting group that helps organizations enhance their corporate cultures and collaboration practices. He's also a best-selling author of books like The Purpose Effect, Building Meaning in Yourself, Your Role, and Your Organization, as well as Flat Army, Creating a Connected and Engaged Organization. I had the pleasure of seeing Dan speak at a conference where we were both speakers at different times. He speaks all the time. He's done numerous TED events, and he's working on a new book. These are things we're going to talk about today. But without further ado, Dan, welcome to the TalentGrow Show.
Halelly, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here today. And, we're going to riff about culture and purpose, and just delighted to have a chat with you.
Well, I'm very glad that you agreed to come on, and I'm looking forward to sharing your wisdom with our listeners. But before we get to that, I always ask my guests to give us a brief overview of their professional journey, and which, of course, is a challenge. You've had an illustrious and interesting journey, but give us a sense of where you started and how did you get to where you are today?
First of all, the journey is not done.
Well, of course not.
Right? So it's an ongoing journey. It's in perpetuity until I'm 6 feet under, I suppose. But I started out thinking I wanted to be a high school teacher. And so I started out high school teaching. And that lasted 3 years until I realized that there was a general incongruence between me and what was in the staff room. And the staff room teachers were just a little bit apathetic for me. They weren't really into their gigs. And I was like, well, aren't you teachers? Aren't you supposed to love kids, love teaching? And they weren't. And so I needed to get out of there. And I realized it was, against my purpose, if you will. So I went and moved into higher education for 5 years. And so I ended up running these programs for an Institute of Technology for career changers who already had a degree or diploma. So I was working with adults. And that's where I really started to learn about the semblance of unity between leadership and technology and collaboration and culture and purpose. So that's really where things started to get going. And then I said, well, if I'm going to be a better academic, perhaps I should go into the, quote, real world. And I joined the corporate world in 2002. And for about 6 years, I worked in a high-tech company that went through a bunch of different manifestations and ended up being SAP, the German-based large ERP company. And I was chief learning officer throughout those 6 years. And then I joined TELUS, which is kind of like the AT&T of Canada. and it's a telecommunications company where I jumped ship to join that outfit to help them with their culture change in 2008. And I was CLO for about 5 years. And then 3 years ago, I started something called TTO, TELUS Transformation Office. Inside of TELUS, it's this external kind of future of work consultative Sherpa shop where we help other companies and not-for-profit and public sector organizations whom are interested in culture change, purpose, leadership, learning, etc. So there you go. There's the nutshell of Dan over the last 20-odd years.
That's really awesome. So I have so many questions I want to ask you about it, but it makes me think of Zappos Insights. Is it fashion similar to how that program was started within Zappos to teach others about how to get the Zappos culture? Robbie Richmond, who ran that, was my guest on the show not long ago.
Yeah, you're spot on, as they say in England. And between Zappos Insights and two others that we look to with high regard would be Ritz-Carlton. And Ritz-Carlton has a customer service wing to their hotel empire where they help people understand how to do the Ritz-Carlton level of customer service. Mm-hmm. And then there's Disney Institute, yes, whom also have it from a creativity perspective. So for TELUS, I mean, it's a telecommunications company. What the heck are we doing in culture change, leadership, learning? Well, it's just that. Why not? Because we've gone through that experience and we're just trying to help when we can.
Makes perfect sense. And kudos on your success. It sounds like, you know, in big part because of what you've done and the leadership that you've brought there is why they're sought after as a role model. So that's very cool.
Well, yes and no. I mean, that's a very kind thing to say, but I would never take credit for it. I mean, TELUS is an organization from the board and CEO down back in 2007, 2008 that wanted to change its culture. And quite frankly, I'm just riding on the coattails of an organization that together wanted to change the way it served its customers. It chipped in the communities in which it served. And, you know, there are certainly some things that I was able to lead, but it is a team effort. And I think that's where, if anyone's looking at culture change or becoming a purpose-driven organization, it's really a team effort. It's an ultra marathon as well, not a light switch. Mm-hmm. And it's not up to one individual to make that change.
So what would you say if you could give like the very high level view of the kind of culture maybe that you had before the change and the kind of culture you have at TELUS now and that people want to learn about? What would you say?
Yeah, I'd say it was kind of a 50-50 split of people who were open-minded, transparent, and people who weren't. And that could be employees or that could be leaders. And we call employees team members. So, you know, right around the 2006, 2007, 2008 era, you know, our employee engagement score, if we're to use that just as a barometer, right, was very low 50s. And it basically juxtaposed between 50, 53, 57 for several years. And then once we really said as an organization, you know, why are we here? We're here because we serve our customers. We're here to delight them. So how do we put customers first? Well, we better have an engaged team member culture. And once we started to do that and chipped away at things like our leadership model, our learning model, our recognition model, our performance development practices, how we moved the organization from you're not allowed to work from home to 70% of our organization of over 45,000 people are mobile workers or work from home 100% of the time, wow, which we call flexible work styles. Mm. And a cadre of other, you know, I would say human capital, people practice type things. When you add it up all together, you know, our engagement score went from the low 50s to the high 80s. And then basically every other business metric started to be positively impacted. So, you know, absenteeism went down by 3 days per person per year. Resume submissions went from about 100,000 to over 400,000 per year. And then, you know, financial metrics like our revenue, our profitability, and shareholder return, as we're a publicly traded company both in New York and Toronto, all went through the roof. So there's a causality argument here that we like to say at TELUS that when you have engaged employees, that will put customers first. your business and community ultimately prosper.
Interesting. So it's almost like as a company, you put the employees first and ask the employees to put the customers first.
I think that's a really good way of saying it. I mean, we have our mission around here is each and every day we put our customers first in our daily actions. And so that means, for example, call center agents who operate obviously complaints and issues that pop up from time to time as a telecommunications company. They are empowered to make decisions rather than having to go through a hierarchical approval order of 6 different layers to maybe discount a customer who might have an issue that has been, say, lengthy. That's the type of things we had to look at from the frontline team members and how you make them feel as though they are part of it, and they have to be part of it, i.e. the customer first mantra. And if they're not, and if you're just relying on 800 senior leaders that are directors and above to ultimately create your customers first engine, then what about the other 45,000 plus, right? Aren't they just as important as your 800 most senior people? And that's where you start from. And then you say, yeah, if team members are put first, they will put the customer first and good things start to happen.
Wow. Great. I love it. And I hope that people will go get your books so that they can get, there's so much more that you have to share. We don't have enough time to go deep on every one of those ideas right here. But I do want to ask you, since you focus so much on developing culture, developing employees, and developing leaders, from a leadership focus perspective, what have you seen to be maybe the 1 or 2 biggest challenges that you think leaders in today's workplace are facing, and what would you offer them as solutions?
Those are perfect questions. So I think it's twofold. And one is about looking in the mirror, and one is about looking through a window. So here's my metaphor. So in the mirror, a leader has to look at him or herself each and every day and ask this question. Am I playing for the name on the back of my jersey or the crest on the front? And so if you kind of use that metaphor for a second, as they look in the mirror, they say, okay, am I leading because I'm interested in my own name, which means that I'm interested in simply upholding my title, my power, my budget, my salary? Am I climbing the, quote, career ladder just for the sake of me, or maybe extra responsibility, extra remuneration, extra salary, extra budget, extra team size, et cetera, maybe those are outcomes and they are thus an output of being a more harmonious, open, humble leader. And time again, when whether it's executive coaching or working with teams or working with organizations, when the leader looks in the mirror and makes that switch from playing for the name on the back to the crest on the front, i.e. the team, the organization, et cetera, wow, do you ever see a stark difference in the behavior of how they treat their people, treat their organization, which then ultimately allows this camaraderie, this harmony, this engaged manifestation of people working together for each other to then serve the interests of the business or the public sector organization or the not-for-profit. That's an amazing thing to see when they look in the mirror and say, yeah, you're right. Good things happen when I'm not just interested in myself. It's classic narcissism reverse, right?
Perfect. Love it.
So the second one is looking through the window, and that's when you're looking at the team. So what often happens for leaders is that they're not interested enough in their own team as they look through the window. And so when I say the window analogy is that what I often see are, executives or leaders, and they're in an office and they've got, glass windows or glass doors right in their office. And then the rest of the team are in cubicles, right, and the floor around them. So everyone's kind of milling about out there in cubicle land, and they look through the window and say, oh, I wonder what John or Sally are up to today. And vice versa. Really, the question is, okay, John or Sally, you're the leader in your window office. What are you doing to break down the window such that you are asking questions and involving yourself and asking for opinion of the people in the cubicles? So this goes back to a more collaborative leader is ultimately a more effective leader, because then it becomes not the I in team, it's the me in team, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are together. So when leaders then look through the window and they say, I need to do a better job of asking Dennis about how his tournament went as a coach with his kids this weekend or this past weekend. I need to go speak with Jennifer and find out if things are going okay with her mom, who she just put into, the retirement home. I need to go out and speak with Dominique and sort of get Dominique's opinion about how that marketing campaign played out. And maybe, is there something different that we can do next time? Like, these are the type of proactive, compassionate, collaborative type leadership windowless criteria that ultimately gets an employee engaged. And as more employees get engaged, they break down the window barrier. And when that happens, again, they're going to, if you're sort of a Godfather fan, right, go to the mattresses, right? They're going to go above and beyond the call of duty. And so then that ultimately serves both the interest of the organization and thus the leader, but the customer in which they're serving. And so when people or leaders look through the window and break it down, ultimately, I assure you, these good things happen.
Nice. And I like how you connect the purpose and the what's in it for me, right? Because sometimes I worry that when we give advice like that, it sounds like we're telling the leader to be selfless, right? Or to put themselves out of the equation completely. And I think that it's against human nature. I think in human nature is to take care of yourself, and it's proper that you do so, but not at other people's expense. And you're making a nice link between how focusing on the well-being of the others and the organization ultimately helps to create well-being for the recipients of the value that the organization creates, which are the customers, and ultimately keeps you employed, keeps the organization growing, keeps your team humming along. So it's a very virtuous cycle. It's just a less direct link to me.
This is just it, right? I mean, it's not 100% selfless, and it's not 100% selfish. It's this balance, and I think that's where this either or, this left or right, it's got to be all this way or that way. It's absurd. I mean, when you're integrating both the needs of the business, because if we're talking about a for-profit organization, right? Let's not kid ourselves. You need revenue and profit to continue.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's kind of goes without saying. But that doesn't mean it has to be done in such a way where, we suffer fools gladly, and we do so in a way that creates this discontent, this malcontent within the organization itself. And I need not remind you, clearly with your background, right, how we know from Blessing White to Aon Hewitt to Gallup to McKinsey, all these data points suggest that, in fact, we are not doing that. So the disengagement, even the disenfranchisement in our organizations from a data and research perspective suggests that there's not enough leaders listening to this balanced need between driving business result, if you will, but also having that empathetic concern and involvement of people in order to meet those goals.
Exactly. They're intricately connected.
Absolutely.
I agree. So I engaged with you in a little conversation on Twitter when I saw that you were leaking out that you're working on a new book. So I got really curious. This is probably how this conversation got catalyzed. But do tell, what are you working on?
Well, I love that tweet exchange, by the way, because you're one of about 5 people that paid attention to it. So someone's listening. It proves you should put some things out there. Yes. Well, I'll say this. If the first book was about culture and leadership and engagement, the Flat Army book that you kindly introduced, and the second one about purpose, so purpose of self, purpose of the organization, purpose of role, this kind of unique Venn diagram that ultimately creates a sweet spot, that what I recognized as I continued to write the purpose effect, actually, that there was a link between culture and purpose with how we're thinking, both individually and in the organization. I guess I can't really write a book these days that isn't looking at both the self and the org. I kind of think they're intricately linked, right? Mm. So it's called Open to Think. The subtitle tentatively is called A Strategy for Better Thinking. And And what I've recognized through the interviews we've done thus far, the research, looking at the philosophy, looking at the history of thinking, is that these days, what we are practicing more of is what I call ignorant thinking. And ignorant thinking is when we don't spend enough time, if you will, marinating in the moment. We're not dreaming, we're not pausing, and ultimately we're not reflecting. And what we're doing is we're spending far too much time taking action without thinking before the action. So this kind of societal ADD has occurred, and particularly in the organization, where there's not only the do more with less mantra that seems pervasive and almost ad infinitum part of everyday conversation.
Yes.
It's that we are lost, if we will, the ability to recognize that pausing and reflecting is actually part of growing and thinking. So when you're quote not looking busy, or you're not answering emails, you're not answering social media, or your phone's not lit up all the time because there's all these constant interruptions and notifications, it's as though that you're not worthy. It's as though that when we're not spending the time as a team just looking out the window, that all of a sudden there's reprimands and reprisals for not looking busy. So this penchant for being busy is actually creating some strife in our orgs and with people, because we're not what I call creative or critically thinking. So open to think is these three types of thinking: creative, critical, and completion thinking, and how we need to rebalance what those three types of thinking mean, if both for ourselves and the organization we want to feel good about our culture, our purpose, and the way in which we're just conducting day-to-day work.
Wow. And so do you recommend spending, like, proactively or intentionally aligning some of your time to different kinds of thinking modes?
Exactly. Now, of course, thinking happens in different ways, right? So there are times when, let's say, a neurosurgeon is in the operating table. It's going to have to make some very quick decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the best time to dream when you're life or death. So let's take some of the anomalies out of the situation that are obvious to everyday life, like driving in a car and you approach a stop sign and someone's run through it, and you've kind of make that immediate reaction. Like, let's just discard those for a second, human nature decisions. But exactly. So when you're in the organization, when you're running your life, when you're an employee, HR leader, marketing leader, sales leader, it doesn't matter. What we need to be doing more of is reflecting. And then when we reflect more, we'll be able to make these better no-go decisions. So this critical analyses from the dreaming, the analyzing, and the kind of conjuring up of this reflection will then allow us to make better completion actions, because we'll have spent some time in the other two quadrants, as I say, dreaming, analyzing, and then making that right decision. So if we can do that, yeah. And there's good examples history-wise of where this came to be. Like, the company 3M actually allowed its employees back in the 1940s 15% of their time to dream.
Yes.
Right? Google engineers is another example, with the sort of very famous 20% Google time, where they could dream up anything that they wanted to. And good examples that came out of that were things like Gmail and Google+.
Right.
And just, other notable history figures, right? From Isaac Asimov to Edison, they all spent time dreaming. Mm-hmm. And in this world where we are sucked into the vortex of quarterly analysts who are expecting updates, we need to take a step back and say, for the health and preservation of both the individual, the team, the organization, and society, we got to think about the long now more.
Nice. It makes me think, I'm not sure if I remember it correctly, but maybe it was like Benjamin Franklin who had a daily walk habit where he did a lot of his thinking.
As did Einstein. That's exactly it. Yeah. Einstein would ride his bike. And that's, for me, I'm certainly not Einstein by any stretch, but I've stolen his bike riding act as that daily time for me, depending on the day of the week and where I am, right? Somewhere between 45 minutes and 3 hours where I'm on a bike. And, half the time I'm on that bike without any distraction, i.e. there's no earbuds, or I'm not listening to music or anything. It's just me and nature thinking.
Yeah.
Although I'm actually doing stuff, right? Because I'm obviously my brain's working in another way to avoid traffic, to spin my tires or spin the wheel, right, to get the tires going, and I'm navigating, right? So there's still some thinking going on, but it's not the thinking, like it's parallel thinking with the dreaming as I'm doing something, which is almost ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I get it totally. And it allows your subconscious to process stuff, which is where, intuition comes into play and a lot of ideas and connections form, where you connect disparate things to create new ideas or solutions to problems.
Absolutely.
Love it.
Absolutely.
And I bet you were probably mentioning Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh God, he's right in chapter 1 already. I'm about 4 chapters into the 9 that'll make this particular manuscript. So Kahneman has influenced me greatly, and there's some great luminaries out there that have really done a great job. And different types of thinking, right? So you kind of delve into emergent thinking, integrative thinking, design thinking, liminal thinking. There's a bunch out there that some are too academic, some are too flighty, but when you do the research and you kind of pull from it, you say, for me, this notion for the organization to simply break it down to something I call open thinking, this open thinking model of creative, critical, and completion, I'm hopeful for a very simple antidote for both the individual self and the organization.
That's excellent. And that's coming out in 2018, right? This book.
You got it. It's May of 2018, right?
Wow. I'm looking forward to reading it. Sounds amazing. So I wanted to ask you, I really want to talk to you for much longer than 30 minutes. It's very irritating to me that I've selected this. It's actually something I struggle with. And listeners, please let me know what you think if I should maybe extend the podcast. So just a real quick side detour. I find it very interesting and instructive, and I try to bring it out when I encounter it. When some people select not to have a binary choice about I want to be out on my own or I want to build like a solo career versus I want to be part of a big organization. And there's some people that do this successfully in dual tracks, and you seem to be one of those. You have a corporate job, you have a lot of responsibility, you have a lot of success, you're not neglecting that, but at the same time, you are developing your own brand and you're speaking as you and you're writing and you're blogging. And I'm really curious if you can share with us, like, how have you managed that division and what would you give as 1 or 2 tips for the listeners if they're thinking about doing something like that? We've had a couple of guests on the show that have been like that.
Well, I'm very honored that you'd ask me for an answer on my opinion for me in sort of my career trajectory. I guess, there was a wonderful book back in 2011, 2010, maybe, Joanne Cleaver, called The Career Lattice. And Career Lattice is a book where basically she's getting on about how it is not a vertical climb that you should be concerned about, but more so lateral, distinct, and even parallel at the same time additions to your career, to your skill sets, etc. And that's that came out after I'd already thought through long ago that that's how I need to operate. I need to be in parallel doing things from a career perspective that embolden my learning, but I guess ultimately embolden me and how I'm viewed. So let's try to break this down specifically. I've always been an educator. So, you've heard the story where I started out doing my BA, BEd. I was a teacher. I got into higher ed and in chief learning officer roles, right? I'm an educator specifically. Now, educators, for me at least, are not just sage on the stage. So I've been fortunate to ask to do a bunch of TEDs. I do like 30 or 40 keynotes a year. That's kind of educating, right? So the keynote thing and the speaking thing is really an extension of educating. But I didn't necessarily consider myself a writer, which is weird as an educator. But I thought, well, there's something more to being an educator, Dan, why don't you give a go at writing? And so I just started out with my own blog and continued to hone and practice publicly, right, asking for opinion, which then led itself to other outlets, whether that was Forbes or HBR, Huffington Post, where these things started to happen. And then, a publishing company came and found me at a speaking event and said, have you ever thought about making or publishing a book? And I was like, not really, but here's where some of these things happen with this idea of the career lattice. You gotta be humble, right? And have a sense of humility, and you got to put yourself out there. So it sounds contradictory, right? How can you be humble and have humility if you have to put yourself out there? Well, you do. If you want to get noticed, you have to put yourself out there, but don't be doing it, again, back to that name on the back of the sweater analogy. I write and I speak because I want to educate. I want to help, which goes back to this central point, I suppose, or two central points. I've always lived by this little mantra that I've developed called, we're not here to see through each other, we're here to see each other through. Mm-hmm. And so this has tightened over the years and has a firm grip over my, Bill George might call it the North Star. Like, it's my declaration of purpose, really. That's who I am. And I'm going to pay it forward at a Starbucks for the next customer, anonymously, as much as, I'll see a tweet stream with you and I and say, yeah, I'd love to be on the podcast. Let's do it. Right. So that's the thing. Like, I think if we have more reciprocity in this world, and you as an individual, some of these career things and the lattice thing and the parallel things start to happen, which then lends itself to point number 2. And that is, the adage I live by, another one I live by, is my network is my net worth. Mm. So I'm only as good, really, at the end of the day, if I'm like a gardener tending to the network that I've built or that has come across. And I don't diss people, or at least I don't think I'm dissing people. Again, I try to be respectful. I try to understand opinions, whether it's political, religious, geographical, company, whatever. Like, I think respect is a really important part of building out that network. So if you have the respect, you have the network, and you tend to it like a garden, and you have this notion of reciprocity, this, I'm not looking through you, I'm trying to help you through things. And ultimately, in parallel to me, going back to me specifically, I consciously said, well, education, me, is part business, part writer, part speaker, part reciprocity, part network, part, yeah, sure, let's see if we can maybe work this out. And then it's, I've just turned 45. And so it's been basically since university, about 20 odd years of tending to that ethos. I guess it's just a case of, knock on wood, and I'm knocking on my head because that's where the wood is.
It's almost like you're driven to do it.
Yeah, really. I'm the same Dan midweek at 10 a.m. as I might be on a Saturday at 8 p.m. as I might be coaching soccer Sunday morning, right? I mean, wherever I go, it's opportunities to build a network, to ask how people are doing, to be humble and have humility, to be collaborative, to reach out, to respond to an email, to not, diss people. Like, it is really this life-work integration piece. People speak about work-life balance. I mean, this may sound odd, but I don't believe in work-life balance. Mm-hmm. It's not about balance. It's about integrating your values and who you are. If you want to be, doing multiple things and seeing yourself grow, whether it is, in my case, right, author, speaker, consultant, things that I do with TELUS, internal and external, to me, it's all the same. Mm-hmm. And it's about respect and how you operate your life in that vein.
I know that one thing that's new and exciting for you is the new book. Is there anything else that's got your attention these days?
It does. And what's really driving me crazy these days is what's happening to society with this fixation on staring at their devices. So I'm really contemplating delving into the fixation on screen time, device time, versus looking up and again, participating in the moment. So with 3 kids that are 13, 11, and 9, it's haunting me.
Yes, I totally get it. I totally get it. And if we had more time to talk, I would tell you that everything you were talking about, the thinking and taking time to just dream, I totally think it's connected to having this urge to feel busy and the screen and the device filling in for that and just sort of being our constant companion. We don't allow ourselves to be alone anymore. So before we tell people how to stay in touch with you and learn more from you and about you, what's one really specific action that you would like our listeners to take today, tomorrow, this week, that you think can help them upgrade their leadership skills?
Well, of course, I think everyone this second, if you haven't written down your 1 or 2 lines that are your declaration of purpose, your North Star, your who you are, what you want to be, and how you're going to show up each and every day, this 1 or 2 line, personal purpose statement, do that. Put it on a sticky note on your laptop or your office or wherever, and look at it and stare at it and say and commit to yourself, this is who I am and this is how I'm going to be.
Do you have specific instructions for this exercise in your book, Purpose?
Indeed, yeah, in the Purpose Effect, for sure.
Purpose Effect. Okay, great. Well, so give us an example of how you wrote yours, just so that we have a sense of what that might look like.
Well, I thought about who I am, the type of guy that I am. I'm an extrovert. I love being around people. And how am I going to help those types of people, with whatever it is that's going on in their lives, right? So that's that notion where I tried to think through how I might have been or how I might be in pressure-filled stress situations. And then how do I turn that around to be the antithesis of it? So that's hence the point of I'm not here to see through you. I'm here to see you through. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's, to me, it may be slightly more philosophical and poetic, but it's the notion that if I see someone fall down, I'm going to help them up. If someone asks for help, I'm going to say, sure, how do we make this happen? That's just humanity.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for that. Well, Dan, it's been fun talking with you, and I'm sorry that our time is up, but maybe we can have you back on for a round 2. And in the meantime, how should people say hello, stay in touch, and learn more from and about you?
Well, thank you. I would love to be hanging out with you again at some point in the future. So count me in. First, one way to pay homage to me, I suppose, is to donate a couple of cans of food to your local food bank. And then if you're online, www.danpontefract.com.
Excellent. And we're going to link to Dan's website and social media and books all in the show notes of this podcast. And so thank you very much, Dan, for being our guest. And thank you for listening, everyone. Talent growers, what did I tell you? Dan had so many good insights to share and also very actionable advice, I think. I hope that you will take him up on that last piece of action that he was suggesting you take, plus really think about all of the other things that he suggested you can do to improve your culture, to improve your leadership, and to improve your thinking. Thank you for tuning in to the TalentGrow Show, which I'm very proud has been selected to be part of the C-Suite Radio network of podcasts. These are podcasts from the world's leading business experts and podcasters for C-Suite leaders, business executives, and entrepreneurs. And it features premium content designed to increase knowledge, deepen understanding, and build skills to enhance your personal and professional lives. So check it out. It's on c-suiteradio.com. And if you're not getting my weekly newsletter, which is short, fun, and very actionable, why not? Come on, sign up. And you get the free tool that I've created for listeners of this show called The 10 Mistakes Leaders Make and How to Avoid Them. And if you don't like the newsletter, you can always unsubscribe. It's free, it's short, and I try to make it with you in mind, which means I try to make it super actionable and very useful. And of course, I always welcome feedback about the show, about my newsletter, about anything that you take the time to give me feedback about, because that's how I get better. One last announcement, and this one is super time-bound. I was featured as one of 24 thought leaders and experts on the Global Influencer Effectiveness Summit. And that is something that is actually going on right now as this show is being released. And it started on March 6th, and it's going for 14 days. And it features a bunch of great speakers talking about proven unconventional modalities to ignite change in others. It was organized by the innovative influencer Sylvia Schroeder, and she pulled it together. I was happy to participate, and my part was featured yesterday, which was March 13th. Today's March 14th. That's when I'm releasing this episode. So I was told that my part will only be up for 48 hours, which means there's 24 hours to go. So go grab it, and also, of course, listen to all the other great speakers. That's over at bit.ly/ Global Influencer HA. That's bit.ly/Global Influencer HA. HA stands for Halelly Azulay. And the show notes and all of the links to everything that we mentioned in this podcast, and of course, a way for you to sign up for my newsletter and grab my free tool, that's all over at talentgrow.com/podcast/episode49. I'm really glad you stuck around. I appreciate you listening. I hope that you found it valuable. And I'm still Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist, hoping that you'll make today great.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Grow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.